The Fellowship of the Great Physician welcomes you to House Call. Our hosts today are doctors of chiropractic, Dr. Gerald Lala and Dr. Richard Jensen, who is also a board-certified acupuncturist, practice independently in North Oaks, Minnesota. Let's join our hosts for today's program that will assist you in your quest for optimum health and well-being.
Welcome to House Call. I'm Dr. Gerald Lala, and this is my friend Thomas Benarat. Tom is an attorney, and he specializes in personal injuries, and that includes people who have been involved in automobile accidents as well as people who think that they've been involved in some form of medical malpractice, which would include any dimension of doctoring, chiropractic, medicine, dentistry, physical therapy, whatever.
The whole gamut.
The whole gamut. And it's a serious business. And some of you, we know, have been watching previous programs that we've done on Minnesota no fault and whiplash injuries. And if you're interested in that, you can always go out to our website and look at those programs. They're all out there. There's hundreds of programs out there. Are they out there on your website yet?
They will be soon.
Soon, so they can do video streaming out there.
Correct.
And so we're going to spend some time with you talking about fraud. Now, does fraud exist? It certainly does. You can't open up the newspaper or turn on the television set or radio and not hear about some fraud going on. And a lot of it goes on in the health industry, but of course we're all humans. And some people make mistakes, and we're not in any way trying to castigate doctors or attorneys that they're trying to commit fraud, but there are a very small percentage of healthcare providers and perhaps an attorney or two once in a while that do get involved in fraud. And so we're going to talk about some federal statutes related to fraud, not to make you an attorney or to have you practice law, because that could be certainly fraud, or if I was practicing medicine, that certainly would be something illegal if I presented myself as a medical practitioner. And so we want to introduce to you some areas that you should be sensitive, particularly when you're selecting a healthcare provider or maybe an attorney with reference to fraud. So we're not accusing anybody or making accusations. We don't have anybody in mind right now. We're not thinking about anybody in particular. And it said in the introduction of the program, both Dr. Jensen and I are chiropractic physicians, but we're also ordained ministers. Does that make us good? No, not necessarily. We just had experiences in our lives where we decided that we wanted to make Jesus our great physician. And does that make us a better chiropractor than anybody? No, it doesn't. Sure, there are other chiropractors who aren't Christians who are probably better than us, but we aspire to treat everyone as if they were Jesus. And we know that if we set that standard, we'll always try to do the best job that we could. And that really involves something that we call servant or survivalist. We believe that God did create us to be servants here on earth. And but then some people have a survival mode, and that puts, when you have a survival mode, you're always putting your interests before other people's. And I know Mr. Benarat here is a servant. We wouldn't have anything to do with him if we didn't feel that he was a good, honorable, honest man. And of course, we found over the time that we've known him to be an excellent attorney as well. So he has a servant mode. He puts things, his family, puts his clients before himself, and so we can put a lot of trust in Tom to do the right things for us. So we're going to talk about the first thing, the Stark Law.
Correct.
Could you tell us what the Stark Law basically involves?
Sure. What it does is it prohibits anyone from either knowingly or willfully doing something where they're going to get a kickback or to induce referrals, money to come back to you, where there's a federal healthcare business involved. I mean, basically, I can't do something as a practitioner that's going to allow me to get a kickback of money. If I do that, it's illegal.
So in other words, if I had a referral relationship with you or something, and I had something worked out with an attorney, of course we don't have that relationship, and I said, well, for every patient that I send to you, you give me $1,000 or something, that would be a violation of the Stark Law?
Correct. And actually there's more to it than that, even, because as a attorney and a non-attorney can't agree to basically share in or split fees, so it even goes beyond that. But yeah, that would be improper. It's one thing if I make a recommendation that someone see you. It's another thing if we have a pre-arranged situation where, yeah, I'm giving you something in exchange for doing that, or you're giving me something in exchange.
Well, let's say that both of us are chiropractic physicians, and you're my biological brother. If I sent business to you and then we had a relationship that you gave me some money or some kind of a kickback for that, is that violation of Stark Law then?
My understanding is it is not. We can, as long as we're both in the business of doing that, we can have some sort of arrangement. We can send things back and forth. It's different than if it was a non-chiropractic relationship where you're doing it. You can do it that way, you just can't do it with a non-chiropractor.
So in other words, I could refer to you.
If I was a chiropractor, correct.
And you were and we shared a clinic or something
Absolutely.
like that? But would it be violating the law if the law would not be violated as long as there wasn't any money, that you weren't giving me money for that referral?
Absolutely.
Okay. Now what about, let's say there are some companies that market chiropractors and medical facilities and dental facilities that they say, well, we'll bring a truck into your parking lot and we'll do all of these MRIs of patients that you schedule. And we'll give you a certain amount of money for every patient that you refer for an MRI while we've got our truck in our parking lot today or tomorrow or for the week. Is that violating Stark Law?
I think technically it would probably depend on who the payment was going to and who was making the payment for the service being provided. If it's a federal health care issue, then it certainly could violate and probably would violate it. It would get into probably having to look into where the billings were going, though, after the fact to try to really sort it all out.
Well, I've had companies years ago come to me and say, well, what we'll do is we'll pay you a certain amount of rent for a part of your office. And let's say that, I don't even know what rent is for a square foot in our clinic, all right? But let's say it's $500 a square foot. That's pricey, I assume. It must be real pricey. And they'll say, well, what we'll do is there's a room in there, 8 by 10. Even though we're going to be doing the x-ray out there, I'll have a person in there who will be recording the patient's name and things like that. Then they'll go out to the truck for the MRI. And I'll pay you $1,000 a square foot for that, for renting that office for the week. Would that be considered a kickback then?
Well, yeah, and I think in my book, anything that kind of smells fishy probably is fishy, and there it clearly would be, where they're using a space solely for the purpose of being able to pay you and then doing it at a rate exceedingly higher than what you would otherwise pay. It gets certainly on an area where it's a slippery slope, and if it smells bad, probably better to stay away from it.
Now that's the Stark Law is a federal law. Does
Correct.
that have any ramifications then on state law?
Well, it can, again, and that's where it gets into the particulars, at least as I think of it, of chiropractors sharing business with non-chiropractors, attorneys with non-attorneys, and those things. I mean, I can't share fees with a non-attorney. There are certain rules, professional responsibility, that would allow me to share fees with an attorney if they referred me a case, but you have to follow strict guidelines. Same thing goes with a chiropractor. There's certain things you can and can't do, but you can't share and/or a non-chiropractor, because of the corporate practice of medicine doctrine, can't. There's certain things you can and can't do.
Okay, and then that would go to our regulatory agencies as
Correct.
to govern us then.
Correct.
How about then, say, erroneous healthcare claims versus fraudulent healthcare claims? What does that stimulate you to say?
Well, it stimulates me to say that in order to be able to figure out what is erroneous and what is fraudulent, you walk that fine line of trying to figure out whether or not the error made was intended or whether or not the error made was simply an error. It again becomes an uncomfortable situation if you're probably the provider being looked at. But certainly everybody makes errors. But I think probably what that in my mind spurs is diligent providers, people that are careful, that have good people that work for them, that they oversee. All those things, certainly everybody makes mistakes. Okay? But it's different to do it and do it knowingly.
Okay, so that would be innocent then. And so that would mostly involve then like billing insurance companies or the federal government. So what would some kind of classical fraudulent things that doctors or billing agencies that doctors hire do?
The most fraudulent thing that would come to mind is somebody that maybe doesn't see a patient but still bills as if they saw the patient on that day, however they may do that. I think that's the classic example that an insurance company would probably give you. I mean, certainly there are other levels. Maybe you bill for a service you didn't provide. You said you used a hot or a cold pack, you didn't. You said you did a 3 or 4 area adjustment and you didn't. Those are the classic ones, but I guess in my mind the one that's kind of just jumps out at you is just blatantly saying you did something and billing for it when you never did it and never intended to do it.
Pretty serious stuff.
Very serious stuff.
I know you were an insurance claims adjuster before going to law school or while in law school?
A little bit of both.
Yeah. And I know that when I've reviewed files for insurance companies, for attorneys, very often now they used to send me half-inch videotapes. Now they send me DVDs, and here it is. They've got an investigator outside of a clinic. A patient goes in, supposedly was injured in an automobile accident or a workman's comp injury, and 3 minutes later they're back out in the car. But then they give me copies of the doctor's billing, and the services had to take at least 2 hours. And I look at that and I say, and then you see that repeatedly.
Correct.
Repeatedly.
Well, yeah.
And you say, wow, this is serious stuff, And it always happens in the fraud unit of the insurance company, and they immediately go to the Attorney General's office. But a lot of doctors seem to think they can get away with that,
Yeah. I think it's probably like you said when we started, there's probably a very few people that make the whole bunch look bad, but certainly there are those that have it happen. Why you'd want to risk your livelihood and your business for something like that, I've never quite figured out, but yeah, it happens.
I know I just read a file yesterday of a chiropractor who was convicted, I think it was upstate New York, and the government, he's going to jail, but in 3 years, I think it was, he had billed fraudulently insurance companies for over $6 million that were paid. They paid it in claims. And I thought, wow, $6 million, that's $1 million a year. That's a pretty nice income. A lot of surgeons are up in that category, And I thought, why would you do something like that? It just doesn't make sense. Well, how about then, could you tell us a little bit about CPT codes and ICD-9 codes?
I can tell you a little bit. I mean, nowadays those are obviously prevalent both in the healthcare and in auto accidents. A lot of what the insurance companies do today is they'll take a bill, they have a computer system set up, similar system to what used to be used a long time ago to determine when you had car damage, if the damage to the car and all the bills and the parts being replaced matched up price-wise, but run them all through, match those against what's wrong with the person, match the diagnosis code, and make sure that, in fact, number one, that the service that's being provided is appropriate, making sure that they'll pay for it, and they run those through. Now, in the no-fault system, they can't, even though some insurance companies try nowadays to reduce the billing like the health insurance carriers do, they can't legally do that. But all those things set the premise in place for that, and there can be a misuse where certain things that are supposed to fit together don't fit together. That's the reason they set up this computer system to try to weed those things out.
So are you saying that, let's say, a doctor billed for $50 for an office call, which is almost unheard of these days, and it was an automobile collision, and the insurance company said we're only going to pay $40, they can't do that?
Correct. They may try, but legally they cannot do that. They don't. In workers' compensation, they can because there's a fee schedule there, much like there is in the health insurance area, and we're all familiar with what happens with health insurance, where when you go to the doctor, X is billed and Y is paid, and Y is always less than X. But auto insurance carriers cannot legally reduce the amount of the bills. They can try, and I suppose if it works, great. But I mean, they can't reduce them, and there's nothing. No part of the No Fault Act allows them the ability to do that.
Well, let's say that the patient doesn't have legal representation. They go to the chiropractor. He said, gee, they'll cut your bill. What recourse does the patient have then?
The only recourse the patient would have at that point is to do one of two things. Arbitrate the case on their own to make sure that the bill gets paid in full, or hire someone to do it for them.
Oh, so they may have to wait until arbitration is conducted for that bill to be fully paid,
unless the provider agrees at that point to willingly do it, even though they've already cut it. Yeah, that would be about the only way that I can think of. I mean, unless the insurance company changes their mind, they're going to have to force their hand to make them do it, and that's about the only way that they're going to be able to do it in that setting.
I see. Now, there's a term, unbundling. What does that mean?
Unbundling to me would mean, when you could when you could bill for services in a bigger package and you split them up so that you can get a bigger fee. If I could, I suppose if you take the 3 or 4 level adjustment, I don't know if this is a good example, but it's one that comes to mind. I could bill it differently, or I could bill it all as one. You get a 3 or 4 area adjustment is going to be one price, but if I split them up, I can get more money.
I see that going on too. Another area I see, because as you know, we run a large internal practice where we do a lot of blood studies and things like that to say if this person really needs vitamins or minerals,
right,
and the dosages. And so let's say we order a lab scan, and those are all called markers. Well, instead of charging one flat fee for it, you could charge for every marker individually and quadruple the charges for it, and it goes on. I've never done that. Thank God we've had people on staff that never did things like that. So, what about the term runners? What does that mean?
Runners are a fairly, I don't know if popular is the right word, but a fairly prevalent thing right now. Basically, runners are this. Runners are people that are hired by possibly medical providers, chiropractors, whomever, to pull a police report, find out who's been in a car crash, go to them and solicit them and try to get them to go to a particular doctor for treatment so that the doctor can obviously bill the insurance company and make money. So I mean, in short, a runner is somebody that they identify somebody that's been in a crash and may need the help of somebody who's could treat them, but then they take them to that facility and more or less solicit their business for the sake of trying to get somebody, a patient, and to be able to bill off.
Now, is that illegal, or?
Under the current law right now in Minnesota, it's not illegal. There was a decision that came down a few years back, but it didn't say it was illegal, it just said it's highly frowned upon. It's illegal if I'm a lawyer and do it. As a chiropractor, you can do it. It's highly frowned upon, certainly depending on how you do it. If you paid that runner per patient, there could be other illegalities that come in because you can't fee split, you can't share fees again with a non-chiropractor, those things. So just by its nature, it's not, but it would all depend on how it all, came about.
So if I'm a patient and somebody comes up, I've been involved in an automobile collision, somebody comes up to my door, or I start receiving letters in the mail, come to my chiropractic clinic, to Dr. Jones' chiropractic clinic, or Smith, or whoever it might be. Should I look kind of cautiously at that then, that somebody is trying to market me, or?
Yeah, different people might have different views, I guess. I mean, there's a lot of people that'll, for a lawyer, what we have to do to be illegal is to be legal, not illegal, is you have to send a letter that has the language advertising material on the outside of the envelope and have advertisement on whatever insert you have. People in car crashes, I see them all the time. They literally will sometimes, I had a guy come back last week, I went to meet him. He was hurt pretty badly. He came back literally with an armful of letters and kind of dumped them on the table for me. And he, here's what I've received. And it was less than a week after his collision.
Any chiropractic offices in that pile?
I'm sure there were. I think a couple come to mind. I don't remember specific names, but there was a few. So it was a mix of lawyers and chiropractors. I mean, it's never to say that there's not a good doctor or a good lawyer in that bunch of people. But yeah, I think you look at them differently. You do your research either way, and probably still, in my opinion, the best referral out of all those would be if you had one in the bunch that somebody had personally told you about otherwise, that's the one I would go to, because you know somebody that trusts them, that's already gone there, and you can feel like you can trust them.
What other things would you say that we call them red flags, you would look for in a doctor's appearance or office, or how they conduct themselves?
Right. Well, anybody that promises you or guarantees you a result probably is going to be, they might tell you how they're going to help you get better, but if they start promising you how they're going to get better or a cure, I think that's a red flag.
And some could be also that I'm implying that if you do what I want you to do, you'll be cured, or?
Yeah. I mean, you want the patient obviously to trust you and to believe you and to think you're good at what you do, but there's a difference between that and guaranteeing if you do this, you're going to get better, and I guarantee you're going to get better.
So does that then sometimes maybe reek of a high pressure type personality then, backslapper?
That would kind of seem that way, yeah. Other things that come to mind, what's the doctor's office look like? Is it clean? Are they professional? Do you feel comfortable there? I think probably more than any of us, whether it's your lawyer, your doctor, no matter what, you want to feel comfortable in the setting you're going to go to and feel like you are getting the benefit of what you're paying for. And in an auto case, you're not paying it directly, but I have a lot of clients that when they find out later, because some people, bill probably more than I think a reasonable amount would be, and when they find out later, when they went for their massage, that they thought, that the cash sign said $45, but when they got it done and they billed the insurance company after everything, it was $175, even they're shocked in the end. It's those sorts of things where, and it probably is in everyone's best interest to ask a lot of questions.
What about if a person wanted to check out to see if their attorney that they have, or their chiropractor, or their medical doctor is in good standing, or has ever had problems with their respective licensing agency? How would they determine that?
Well, with a lawyer, you can go to the contact the Lawyers Professional Board. The chiropractor, I think they'd contact the Board of Chiropractic, right? Medical doctors, Minnesota Medical Association. You know, generally, or the Board of Medical Practice. Yeah, you're going to be able to get information as to whether or not anybody's ever, I don't know if they have a record necessarily of complaints, but they're certainly going to have a record of whether or not they've ever had their license suspended, revoked, any sorts of things like that. You know, again though, that's kind of that's something probably even people that walk the edge don't have necessarily never have encountered. But again, it goes back to if you know somebody and you can get the personal referral and you feel comfortable, all those things are, the most important. But checking people out obviously is a good idea too. So you really know, if there's something glaring, you probably want to run the other way.
How about, certainly you must get into different medical clinics and hospitals and chiropractic clinics and that. What do you kind of look for besides, we've talked a little bit about doctor personalities, pushy kind of personalities. What other red flags would you look at that the patient would be sensitive to when they go into the office for the first time?
Well, to me, if I go someplace, I'd look, you look at all the things that are on the surface. You look for cleanliness, those sorts of things. But, I think you look at, when I have an issue, and this would probably apply for the attorney and or the chiropractor, if I have an issue and I contact them, how soon do they call me back? If I need something from them, if I'm hurt and I can't go to work and I need a doctor's slip, how long does it take them to get it to me or get it to my attorney? Probably even more other things, little things that we all say. We all go to the doctor and we've all been forced to wait. How orderly are they? I've had people that have even set up appointments to go to their chiropractor office and they won't be there. How unprofessional would that be? That's an extreme, but
How about decor equipment and things like that?
Absolutely. X-ray equipment. I know you have state-of-the-art equipment. To me, that's a huge issue. You can say you have an X-ray machine, and it's great if you have an X-ray machine there, but if it's ancient, that probably isn't going to give you what you need. You want now we have the ability to digitize. There's
we do that.
Right. The state-of-the-art equipment helps because the better the image, the better you're going to be able to see what's there and compare it later to be able to help you either in your legal case or to get better, or really to help you know how to treat somebody.
I know I visited a chiropractic radiologist office not too long ago, and this person really reads films really good. He's very good at giving second opinions on X-ray films, but the X-ray equipment in there was so ancient, it was just unbelievable. And I thought to myself, here's a young person, not going to say it was a male or a female, reasonably young, where you're still going to invest in life, as opposed to if you're 80 years old and saying, I'm going to bail out of this thing pretty soon, why invest anymore? And I thought to myself, here I am at my age, and here this person is 25 years younger than me, is board certified in radiology, and has got this piece of old equipment that's just way, way out of standards of the day, and I thought, gee, there's some kind of conflict there,
Well, and the tricky part is if you're the patient there and you don't know any better, it could happen to you and you don't even know that you're not getting up-to-date or kind of gold standard care.
What about, you look at a lot of medical and chiropractic files, physical therapist files, doctor's records. What should the patient be, and a patient has a right to see those files, right?
If I make a request and I'm the patient, I have a right to get my file.
If a patient wants to see my chart notes from that day's visit, they can have them on the way out, right?
Correct.
It's illegal. So,
right.
What is a SOAP note? Let's talk about that first then.
All right. Well, a SOAP note identifies on any given date the subjective, objective, the assessment, and the plan for the patient. Talks about, basically, one of the big, mistakes, or I don't know if you'll call it a mistake, the problems that records, when I was an adjuster and even now, is the similarity with which each one looks. Where it's either copied and pasted, it's all pre-set up, so all I have to do is run down and circle a few boxes so it all kind of looks the same, because it's easy for me, because then I can, if I'm the practitioner, I can quickly get through it and do it. But I mean, what you want is, you want somebody that really cares enough to ask all the right questions each time. Are you getting better? What, if not, what's bothering you since last time? What brought that about? And the kind of, where are we going? The insurance companies love to know what the plan is.
I know one of the doctors, I have it on my computer, I don't particularly like it, where you just dictate the chart note, and they're really cookie cutter. You can see them. I see files like you do, and you can just see they're just cookie cutter stamped the same way every time. But mine would look similar because we always follow the same format: the date, the patient's name, the symptoms, then the objective findings and assessment, and then the plan and next treatment and my name. But I always want to, as a chiropractor, if it's a spinal problem or elbow, I want to know what the ranges of motion in every visit, so I can compare it on subsequent visits. So, I mean, there's that standard thing there every time, but if the range of motion changes,
Right, the template stays the same, but it's not as if you're, it's a circle the box, check the box thing. There's more to it than that, where you're objectively testing things to see, is it better, is it worse, how much better is it?
And I can even tell what program that chiropractor has bought, to do that system. And you usually find that in those practices that are really hyped up, high volume kind of practice, where they're really running them through like hooking a piece of meat on a hook, and slapping them through. What about what is important to the patient and therefore to an attorney with reference to entrance case history and examinations?
Well, I think to me it's the thoroughness.
So it's important that they have a past medical history then?
Absolutely. In fact, I can't name off all the requirements that the state requires. You probably can. But there's a number of things there, and one of the things that's required, particularly at the time of the first visit, is that you get a past case history, you get a past medical history. You go through all those things, and I've heard more than one story, several from you, where even just by accident, when you're treating someone else, you came upon another problem that saved somebody's life. I recently had a client who she was in a car crash, and she was fortunate because in the process, they shot cervical films. They found out that she had a thyroid tumor. They removed it. Everything should be fine. If they wouldn't have caught it when they did, who knows?
I know I see a lot of gimmicks used, and I've probably done the legal profession too, to generate business and things like that. And it's the American system. To make a profit, you have to. Certainly you and I have got a lot of money and time invested in our educations. But I'll see them like give free x-rays away as a gimmick to get people, and people think they're saving money. And then when you look at the x-rays, they're such poor quality, or they're inadequate. They are not properly screening the individual. And so then we go and make the films that weren't made, assuming the previous ones were of good quality, and then we find other things. Now, I don't know if that's malpractice or not, but certainly due diligence isn't been followed there.
Well, and I think arguably, depending on what, it may be malpractice if there was something that should have been caught and wasn't. I mean, I guess, it would depend. But yeah, certainly, getting something for free is nice, but if the quality's not there, free doesn't really matter much.
Well, do you think then, let's say that somebody's involved in an automobile collision, and they do some exam and make some x-rays. Is it important that patients fill out questionnaires that evaluate their present health history, not just the automobile-related, the possible automobile-related symptoms?
Sure. Yeah, because everything or different things can affect other things. I think the last show we did, I don't remember what the title was right now, but we talked about some of those things, how injuries I suffer in a collision can affect a whole bunch of different symptoms. So I think it is helpful, whether you fill it out with me or I fill it out by myself.
Assuming, let's say it's a female person, a woman who's been involved in an automobile collision, and she's pregnant, excluding her. Is it a red flag to you if this person's been involved in a serious automobile accident and the chiropractor's treating them without x-rays?
Well, in that case, it may be because they couldn't, but you're saying excluding the pregnant person? Oh, absolutely. Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Because you don't even know, in that...
House Call TV has been brought to you by the Fellowship of the Great Physician. For further information, please call at 651-484-8521 or visit our website at www.housecalltv.org. Until next time, thank you for listening to House Call.